Good evening, everyone. Welcome. My name is Rowan Neufeld, events coordinator for McNally Robinson Booksellers in Saskatoon. Tonight's event is coming to you live from Treaty 6 territory, the traditional lands of the Cree, the Saulteaux, Dene, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, and Métis nations. A special hello to anyone who's watching the live stream from home. And for those of you who are here in person, thank you so much for joining us. Out of an abundance of caution, we just ask that you keep your masks on for the duration of the event, with the exception being whoever's up at the podium. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the launch of A Snake in the Raspberry Patch by Joanne Jackson. So thank you to Joanne Jackson for being here tonight. And I'd also like to thank Stonehouse Publishing for working with us on this event. So in just a moment, we're going to hear Joanne talk about the book. But first, I'd like to invite Anthony Bedulka up to introduce her. For those of you who don't know, his latest novel, Going to Beautiful, recently came out with Stonehouse Publishing as well, and is currently #1 on our bestseller list. That deserves a round of applause. Stonehouse Publishing books here tonight. So Going to Beautiful has received praise from the likes of Saskatchewan writer Gail Bowen and Alan Bradley. In Going to Beautiful, Anthony Bedulka has created a whole new genre, Saskatchewan Gothic, which will both chill and warm your heart. And we're very pleased to have him here tonight to introduce Joanne Jackson. So let's give Anthony Bedulka a warm welcome.
This is working? Yeah, I should probably be all right. Thank you, Rowan. Hardest working events coordinator in the city, right there. It was about a year ago when Stonehouse Publishing told me that they were going to, along with my book, they were going to be publishing only 4 authors in 2022. And by happenstance, one of those authors was also from Saskatoon, and her name was Joanne Jackson. Now, I'm just going to admit this right now. I was one of those horrible, terrible, terrible people who did not know of Joanne Jackson, had not read her book, her first book, The Wheaton, but I was very keen to remedy that. So I did what people do today when they're trying to find out something about people. What do? You go to your computer and you ask Mr. Google. So I went to Mr. Google and I said, who is Joanne Jackson? Mr. Google said, nothing. So I was forced to conclude one thing, that Joanne Jackson is a woman of mystery. Now, I took that as a challenge. I'm no slouch when it comes to doing online research. So I thought, I'm gonna figure this person out. So I started to do some digging, and it didn't take too long to confirm that indeed she lives in Saskatoon. A little bit more digging, I started seeing that there probably was a husband. His name may be Tom. There's a dog named Mick. A little bit more digging, there might be children, may even be grandchildren. And then the jackpot, the biggest revelation of all. Joanne Jackson likes to walk. That was it. So I just decided that apparently I am going to be launching my book alongside the most mysterious person in Saskatchewan, sort of the Amelia Earhart of the Canadian literary world. But then 2 things happened. The first actually happened not too far from here, right in Prairie Ink Restaurant. First thing that happened is that I met Joanne Jackson. And sometime later, I met her wonderful husband, Tom. Mick the dog is still a little bit of a mysterious figure. The second thing that happened is that I read her book, a snake in the raspberry patch. And suddenly I knew everything I would ever need to know. Joanne is big-hearted. Joanne is creative. Joanne is someone whose face lights up when she smiles. The other thing is that she can really pull together a darn good story. A Snake in the Raspberry Patch is tender. It is sometimes haunting. It is often witty. It is a nostalgic piece of writing that takes place in the summer of 1971. It's a coming-of-age story wrapped within a murder mystery. And Joanne's writing is so visceral that with something as simple as her descriptions of tossing out the dishwater out the back door, or trick-or-treating on a crisp October evening, or a walk in a stubble field, she has transported us to the golden summer of 71 and a small Saskatchewan village where nothing is quite as it seems. So I ask you to please welcome my colleague, my new friend, the woman of mystery herself, Joanne Jackson.
It seems Tony and I didn't collaborate on what we were going to say because he repeated some of the stuff in my speech. Some of you who have seen my previous launch know it's usually more crowded than this. Well, it was last time anyhow, but I guess COVID has a lot to do with it. But also I'm a very heart on your sleeve kind of person, so I tend to choke up really easily. So I've written down what I'm going to say. It's not that it's not personal, it is, but I don't tend to choke up if I read it rather than say it. But I'm going to have to cut some stuff out. So
That's the quality.
we should have got read. Okay. So first of all, thank you, Tony, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to introduce me tonight. Okay, here's the repetitive. The first time I met Tony was last December when we had coffee together at Prairie Inc. We were both publishing through the same publisher, my second book, his 12th, and got together to plan promotion strategy with another author who was publishing at the same time. I've learned so much this time around, and it's all because of Tony. Thank you to everyone who bought and read my first book, The Wheaton. When I'm writing, I always wonder if it's going to be published, let alone read. And thank you for coming here tonight, one of our first adventures into normalcy. I truly appreciate your support. Thank you to my publisher, Stonehouse Publishing, for believing in me and believing in me and my writing. And thank you to McNally Robinson for again hosting in-person launches. Perhaps if I live to be 100, all of a dozen launches behind me as well. Thank you. These people were supposed to be here. Thank you to Kathy. Sorry, well, one of them is this is my wrong. Thank you to Kathy Seymour and Heather, my friend from high school for 55 years. Oh, sorry, Heather. Thank you to Kathy Seymour and Heather McDonald, who willingly read everything from the first to the middle to the final drafts, as well as editing the advanced reader copy. Like Heather always tells me, 2 eyes are better than one. Thank you to Shelley and Isabel, who encouraged me to submit the book, and all of your input was hopefully and in the future will be indispensable. Thank you to Lisa Murphy Lamb, author of a book called Jesus on the Dashboard, who without her editing, there would be no raspberry patch. When one sends the work into an editor, the page is clean and pristine. The first thought you have is, what could they find wrong with this? Except for a few typos, it's perfect. Then it comes back looking like this. Sorry. And this. One more. And this. And those are supposedly just minor fixes, Lisa said. And you put it away for a few hours until you calm down. You tell yourself it's already been accepted for publication. This is just part of the process. But what the heck is wrong with it? I'm so glad I took Lisa's advice and used 99% of her suggestions. And lastly, I'd like to thank my husband, Tom, for being by my side when I'm too afraid to do here comes the tears. I'm too afraid to do this kind of thing. And my daughter Maureen, son-in-law, her husband Aaron, and son Scott for their encouragement and for being my tech experts. I'm probably the least capable person on the computer you'll ever meet. Why do we do this? Why do we have launches and give ourselves accolades, sing the praises of our books? It's not like we find a cure for cancer or a way to achieve world peace. It's a book, a fiction book, no less, something we've made up. Sales, I suppose, is part of it, applauding and supporting each other's success is another. But I think mostly it's about celebrating joy. The joy I find in creating it, and joy you'll find, I hope, in reading it. The joy we find in taking ourselves to other places for a few short hours. And if nothing else, what we need in the world right now is a little joy. Sorry. I can't help it. My mom does it too. It's a curse, it really is. Many years ago, before I began to write and actually had time to read, I used to think I should do this too. I should write a book. How hard can it be? All you have to do is come up with an idea, expand on that idea, then turn it into a story that everyone will want to read. I could always think of a beginning. Stories are all around us all the time. Then the pages in between would naturally follow at the beginning, and then the ending would surely fall into place once I got the beginning and the middle, wouldn't it? So I took a writing course through Ryerson College. I went to see writers in residence such as Alice Pipers, Yvette Nolan, and David Polson. I was accepted at Sage Hill Writing Experience, where I spoke to famous authors such as Helen Humphreys and Lawrence Hill. And while I gleaned lots of information doing these things, I also learned the most important way to teach yourself is to just do it. Your fingers are on the keyboard is the only way ideas will come to you. And even then it's difficult. Even when you get to the point where you have the story down on paper, which can take anywhere from 6 months to 2 years, that's only the beginning. 100,000 words that seem like they're never going to make sense, staring you in the face, and you have to sort them all out. Rewriting, tweaking, timelines. Could this really happen? Oh no, that character died in the last chapter. It isn't easy. It keeps you up at night. It makes you crazy. But when things click and the universe tells you you've got it right, it gives you a reason to keep going. It's another paragraph. I'm going to get teary-eyed. Last October, I had a little mishap. I tripped and fell, knocking myself out. I was alone and had no idea how long I lay unconscious on the sidewalk. It's terrible. I know. I hate it. I want Maureen to be my reader. I've asked her before if she could stand it for me, but she says no. I don't recall much of the walk home. My nose was bleeding and the side of my head was becoming very swollen. My husband took me to the hospital where they did test and diagnosed me with a concussion and a subdural hematoma. Every 2 hours for 4 days, 24 hours a day, they woke me up to ask me if I knew who I was, where I was, and what had happened to me. It was a serious injury, but it made me appreciate the fragility of life. So even though public speaking isn't my forte, even though, as you've noticed, I wear my heart in my sleeve, I'm very glad to be standing here today. Thank you for being here to celebrate not only my book, but life with me. Sorry, I really have fun. One good thing that came out of my accident is in the book I'm working on now, my protagonist gets mugged and knocked out. Talk about taking the research too far. So I've got a second novel, A Snake in the Raspberry Patch. The title for this book came to me easily. It may have been the first thing I wrote. I knew what I wanted to say, knew what the story was going to be about, which follows 5 sisters after a farm family is murdered just down the highway from their house. Although when I began, I didn't know who the killer was. I think I was close to halfway through before I figured that out. The seeds for the idea for this book came to me from 2 different places, which I had been thinking about blending together for years. The first was from true crime, a rural family being murdered. It's always intrigued me what could happen while living far from the safety of town. Do you open your door to everyone? Do you have a loaded gun within easy reach? How do you protect your family if something happens? The second seed for the idea came from my mother's story. She's now 92, just about 93, and the oldest in a family of 5 girls and 1 boy who was born when Mom was 12. Growing up, my siblings and I heard many anecdotes from their lives in the small farming town east of here called Viscount. For example, without giving anything away, the dishwater incident. I remember distinctly Mom talking about Aunt Irene throwing dishwater at her, just as Rose throws dishwater in the book. I think Irene was supposed to throw the water in the garden, but instead she threw it at Mom. I remember the picture of Mom and her siblings lined up like stepping stones against the side of the house, just as in the book when Liz and her siblings are lined up and their mom is taking the picture of their first day of school. I remember being at my grandfather's farm and sitting on a pile of grain in the back of his truck, chewing wheat kernels until they were gum in my mouth. or walking down dirt roads where you knew a car was coming along before you saw it by the plume of dust rising in the air. I remember Grandma packing a lunch that all of us piling into the truck to take to Grandpa and the men working in the fields. I don't know how she managed to find them, but she always did. And I remember standing in Grandpa's wheat fields and stalks of grain taller than me, hoping a snake or a mouse wasn't going to crawl up my leg. I got the idea for Rose's memory from me. Just the other day, my husband told me that I can remember things he did wrong from 45 years ago. That's true. In the book, the description of his house, his mom's house in Viscount, Grandpa added the second story himself, wanting to make enough bedrooms for 6 kids. Uncle Roger's room was just a space at the top of the stairs, just as Liz's brother Cole's was. The book takes us through all 4 seasons, something we as Saskatchewanians can appreciate. It begins with the heat of the summer, radiating like steam off the soft asphalt. Hot summer days playing outside, then sitting in the shade to get a separate sandwich of lemonade. It moves into the coolness of fall and beginning of a new school year, and trick-or-treating in coats, cheeks, and mitts, as the girls catching snowflakes on their tongues, then bundled up to the point that all that's visible are their eyes while they hurry home from school. And finally, spring, where the girls are in rubber boots, jumping in puddles and licking dripping icicles they pulled up tree branches and fence posts. School carnivals, Halloween, harvesting, going to the swimming pool, skating, making snow angels. This book drew on so many memories, not just from Mom's childhood, but from mine. Now I'd like to read you part of the first chapter, not the whole thing. When I'm done, if anyone has any questions, that's fine. Just make them easy because my brain isn't working that well. Although that could be just my senior brain. Okay, chapter 1. Dad and some men from the neighborhood have congregated in our living room to toast the birth of my brother with a glass of rye. But mostly the conversation is about the trouble that's happened down the highway, the Tremblays. It's all anyone has talked about for days. I'm on my front step because Jennifer, my best friend, is walking over from her house a few blocks away. Mr. Pendergrass, her next door neighbor, is escorting her. Kids haven't been allowed to be anywhere alone since the afternoon happened. Before supper, Jen called and said she wanted to come over to talk about high school. So, because grade 9 is weighing heavily on my mind, I rushed through dishes. Now she and Mr. Pendergrass are late. And I have to wait outside because our house is full of men. The inside door is open, allowing what little breeze there is on this hot evening to blow through the screened-in front porch. And Dad, not paying as close attention to his daughters as Mom would want, allows the men to talk freely. Deciding to make the most of being stuck out here, I slide behind the dogwood bush where I can hear them without being seen. All I've been able to discern is that the Trombley family were killed the same day my brother was born, but I know a few of the details. I knew Colleen, one of the girls who died, but we weren't best friends. She was a girl who was there when you needed someone to play catch with, so you didn't get to spend recess alone. A girl you liked well enough to invite to your birthday party so you could get invited to hers. I've heard some of the older kids talking outside Fogg's grocery store, or while they're gathered at the park where they could smoke without being seen, but mostly they tell me to get lost before I can hear much. Knowing Dad wouldn't know enough to restrict me, last night after supper I sat down in front of the television to watch the news. I'd made the meal, ground beef casserole with noodles, then washed and dried the dishes by myself. I figured if I was old enough to be cheap cook and bottle washer until Mom came home, I was old enough to sit down and do the same thing my parents do after the supper meal. Lloyd Robinson had just welcomed the viewers to CBC when our phone rang. It was Mom calling from the hospital. She said that under no circumstances is Elizabeth allowed to watch the news on TV. I don't know how she knew what I was doing, but she did. I was resentful about Mom's decree, but I didn't argue, even though I'm more intrigued than scared. How could someone walk up to a stranger and shoot him in the head? Or kill a child as he ran away like those high school kids said he did? These things happen in the big city, and you collect your tongue and say, what a shame, that poor family. I'm so glad we don't live in a crime-infested place like that. Here in Willow's Bend, in the middle of farmland from horizon to horizon, except for an invasion of boomers, the deluge of hail, or a plague of grasshoppers, nothing ever happens. I listen as the men's voices go around the coffee table. Some I can put a face to, some I can't. Mr. Henderson speaks first. Marge was sitting on the front porch playing cards with her youngest. Executed her and the little one right there. I don't know which would be worse. Shooting Marge first so the daughter sees, the daughter first for Marge to witness. Can't even imagine. His voice pauses before he says, don't know what the world would possess him to take Marge's tongue, and I gasp, pressing the back of my hand in my mouth so Dad won't hear. Henry and his oldest boy must have been checking the crops and heard the shots, Mr. Krieger says. Drove home to see what the noise was. They didn't have a chance. Another boy was found in the hedge that circles the house, shot in the head, probably trying to get away. Only blessing is the shots were dead on, and every one of them died quickly, the coroner said. At least he left the children intact. If I catch him, I'll tie him out, gouge out his eyes, then cut off his. My rubber ball sits out of my hand and bounces down our walkway to the front sidewalk. Instead of slowing down, it picks up momentum as it heads across the street. I know at 13 I'm getting too old to play with children's toys, but I still like to see how high it'll bounce before it's just a black dot in the sky. The talkie stops and the floorboards grow. I stretch down behind the bush to sit as still as a mouse while Dad steps into the porch. She returns to the living room without seeing me. In the quiet, I hear the chug of liquid being poured. When's Patricia coming home? Mr. Henderson asks. Tomorrow, Dad says. You finally got your boy, Jim. Glasses clink as the men toast my brother. He's going to have to learn to defend himself growing up with 5 kids, 5 sisters, Dad says. 2 months before my 2nd birthday, Rose was born, and I quickly came to hate her because Mom didn't pay attention to me anymore. Rose is the only one of the now 6 kids who was born at home. Mom has always said that girl just wanted to start living and couldn't wait another second to be born. Hoping for a boy and thinking time might make a difference. Mom didn't give birth for 5 more years, but to no avail. She had another girl. I named her Francine. Then I felt sorry for Rose because she was in the same predicament as me. When Fran was 3, Robin was born, and we all hated the new baby. Though I think Franny was only trying to emulate her older sisters. When poor little Robin had just passed her 1st birthday, Alexander came along, but none of us hated Alex. She's the only one with blue eyes and strawberry blonde hair. The rest of us having green eyes and red hair, like Dad. Mom, who has blue eyes and dark hair, calls us her raspberry patch. For the past few months, the whole family's been suggesting names for our new sibling. I like Marie, which is Mom's middle name. Dad picked Marjorie, but Mom said that's only because it's the name of a girlfriend he had before he met her, and she winked at me. My younger sisters wanted Snow White, but changed to Violet when Mrs. Elfin took us to see Willy Wonka in the chocolate factory, and Rose wanted the more modern name of Kimberly. Mom had picked Janet for a girl's name, but unbeknownst to the rest of us who hadn't even considered a boy's name, she'd been saving the name Cole for years, hoping one day she'd have a son because of it. Dad didn't stay at the hospital with Mom this time. At 3 in the morning when she went into labor, he helped her into the car while I put a sleeping Alex, Robin, and Frowny in the back seat. He dropped the girls off at the Alkins farm, took Mom to the city, then drove straight back home. I guess after having 5 kids, Mom didn't need her husband to stick around and hold her hand. At 8 in the morning when the phone call came, I was prepared to watch his shoulders through because he found out he had yet another daughter. Instead, he stood tall and gave one of his rare smiles. Now Cole is the 6th in line and the only boy at Arville dynasty. We will always remember his birthday of July 21st, 1971, because it's the day the Tromley family was massacred down the highway that leads to the city. Anybody has any questions, you can ask. Maybe I answered everything in the meeting.
Can I hand you the mic so the people on the live stream can hear?
I find it just so interesting that you didn't know who the murderer was or who the snake was until halfway through the book. Is it because you changed your mind?
Partly I changed my mind. I think I thought it was going to be someone else, but then I realized who it was. I just won't give that away. But then I realized who it was halfway through.
Can you tell us without spoiling things?
I don't think I know.
Okay.
Because you can't, how can I say it? It writes itself. You know this. Writing writes itself. The stories are out there and it comes up, action happens on the paper. It comes down on the paper and it writes itself. You know I knew who the killer was halfway through. I knew who it had to be. I suppose I could have changed my mind and rewritten the story, but the way I written it, I knew who the killer had to be. Sorry. That's okay.
So when you first started the book, you didn't know who it was?
I don't think I did. I can't remember. That was quite a while ago because believe it or not, this book was rejected once. And Netta, my publisher, gave me some hints as to how to rewrite it. Heather read the original copy, and she agreed with that, I think. So I rewrote it, and then it was, but that was probably 2018, maybe, I can't remember. But when I wrote the original copy, the original version. But I don't think I knew who the killer was until about halfway through. I thought it was somebody else, but then I realized it was not.
We've got a question over here.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thanks, Dale.
So I hear you mentioned something about you working on another book.
Yeah.
Can you tell us something about that?
It's about 2 teenagers. One lives in a well-to-do neighborhood, and it appears that she has everything she needs. The other one lives in not a well-to-do neighborhood. But And the one who appears she has everything she needs doesn't really have everything she needs. It's called But for the Grace of God. That's the working title. I don't know if it's gonna stay like that, but it's these two girls who one appears have everything, one appears not, are actually opposite. Yeah, still got a ways to go on that one.
I'm gonna ask a question about that book as well.
Okay.
So is it set back in time?
Yes.
I love when you do
Well, I'm
this.
old, Shelley.
No, I love even like old manuscripts that I love that
Oh, good.
set back.
They'll do
I
like
love
this. I think it starts in 1965 and
Oh,
ends in
awesome.
1980. I think that's right. If it stays the way it is, I think that's what it is now. Yeah. It might end in 1985. I can't decide yet.
So there was some mystery in your first book, and then you wrote a mystery. Is there absolutely to be a mystery?
It's not, well, there is a death and we don't know who it is. And we know, you will know. I can't do it. I can't make it anyway. You will know who the killer is.
Who is it?
We don't wanna have to take this off YouTube, okay?
But I can't, there is a bit of a mystery, yes, but mostly it's about things aren't what they appear. This one girl seems to have everything, the other girl seems to have not as much, but it's actually the opposite. Yeah.
So why are you drawn to mysteries? You said the book writes itself.
I don't know. Oh, yeah, I don't know. There wasn't very much mystery in the Wheaton, was there? A little bit, because that can happen in seniors places. Yeah, I think things can go missing in seniors places. Yes, my mom lived in the seniors place for a while. Didn't things go missing? Yeah, things go missing. So I don't know that was really a mystery.
No, but
There was a little bit of mystery. Yeah, I don't know why I'm drawing mysteries. I don't know. The one I'm writing right now is not, I wouldn't consider it a mystery. No, it's more of a drama, but yeah, there's a heart-stopping moment partway through the book, maybe about a third of the way through the book, and then the rest of the book sort of revolves around that heart-stopping moment. But I can't tell you about.
Well, maybe before we have too many spoilers. We can move into the signing portion of the meeting. That
Okay.
works.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for coming. And a huge thanks again to Joanne Jackson. We've got lots of copies of Snake in the Raspberry Patch available for purchase. For anyone who's watching online, you can pick up a copy in store or at mcnallyrobinson.com. Thanks again to Anthony Bidalko for doing the introduction and to Stonehouse Publishing. Have a great night, everyone.
Oh, yes.
That's one thing.